Today, I am joined by Congressman Scott Perry from Pennsylvania to go through some big stories. Congressman, thank you for joining me again.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I want to get your thoughts on this. This is, at first, I thought this was a small story. And then as I started to dig in, I'm realizing this is much bigger. So a few days ago, 6 Democrats made this video production, urging the military to ignore illegal orders from the sitting president of the
Yeah.
United States. They told them that they have a duty to not do what they don't believe in. And then it ended with this old phrase of hold the ship. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on this? Because again, I thought this was small, and now I'm realizing this is like the textbook definition of sedition.
Yeah. Well, they're not, to be clear, I don't think that these members are engaged in sedition themselves, but what they are doing is encouraging, your 20-year-old PFC or, an ensign or somebody to do what they don't have the courage to do, which is to disobey orders. And of course, you probably realize at this point that Senator Slotkin, herself, a member of the a former member of the clandestine services, and on that video was recently asked what orders are unlawful, and of course she couldn't name anything. And here's the thing: as a member of the uniformed military services, a couple things are really important. First of all, you operate under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and under that you give away certain rights. And you can question orders, so to speak, but you better have proof before you question. You can't just say, "Well, I don't want to do that," because that would destroy the process by which military action has to take place. And so you must know when you join, and members that do join, people of the uniform services, are briefed that all orders are assumed to be lawful, unless you can prove otherwise. But of course, nobody has tried to prove anything otherwise. So in that context, they are actually, in my opinion, encouraging other people to take seditious action. Again, action that they don't have the courage to take themselves. And this is important too, in front of the world, which includes our enemies. And so in front of the whole world, including our enemies, they're saying disregard the commander in chief and the chain of command. And China's looking at that, Russia's looking at that, North Korea's looking at that, Iran is looking at that. It is so outrageous to me, just because they don't like the president personally or they don't agree with his decisions politically. And I will just tell you, and you probably already know this, if a member of the Republican Party did this, the Democrats, under Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Joe Biden, they would be calling for that person to be put in jail. And this is all, for me, it's a little more special, I think, for me than many others, because a few weeks back during the shutdown, I was asked by a host about these Democrats that won't vote to pay the troops, but they themselves wore the uniform in the past. And I commented on that, and I said, my experience with the Democrats I served with, and I made that very clear, not all Democrats, and certainly not all Democrats that wore the uniform, but with the ones I served with in Congress, oftentimes I don't think that they're very sincere about their service based on their actions. Well, I was pilloried and criticized roundly in the press for that. But here we go, a couple weeks later, and I'm completely proven out and justified in my statement. These folks, these individuals, and one of them, by the way, one of the people on this video, after I made my comments, came to my district to campaign against me about the issue. And I think probably either knowing he was going to do the video or having done the video, and maybe it took time to produce and get into the, get out there, but or even afterwards, I mean, having come to my district and then encouraging his former fellow members in uniform service to side with the enemy. And that's exactly what this is.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. The very party that refused over 14 times to
Right.
pay the military is now the very party asking them to break the law and go against the commander in chief of the country. Now, President Trump, they're now going out on the mainstream media, on podcasts, on their own X account putting out videos saying, the president of the United States wants me killed. The president of the United States is putting out a hit to have me taken out. They're calling for my death. When in fact, Trump said, wait a minute, this is sedition, which is punishable by death, right? And as you mentioned, it's not that they've actually committed sedition, but man, are they walking the line? And we've got,
well, they're encouraging others to commit sedition, and I think the president is rightly saying and warning those others: if you defy the chain of command in this way, you could be prosecuted, and if found guilty, punishable by death. As to remind them of the oath that they took when they joined the uniform military service and the provisions provided within the Uniform Code of Military Justice, because I'm sure the president doesn't want that for the country, for the uniformed services, or for these individuals that might engage in this, as encouraged by these high-ranking members of the legislature. It's so outrageous and unacceptable, almost to be indescribable.
Yeah. Now, this came out just this morning. The Department of War put out a statement that they are currently investigating whether to reactivate Captain Mark Kelly down in Arizona to military service and then have him court-martialed so that he can go through military courts under JAG law. Is this a bridge too far? Because again, these guys are literally calling for parades and marches and these no king rallies, but then they are undermining the president and calling for anti-constitutional behavior.
Right. They do call for the no kings rallies. At the same time, they demand the president defy the law and just pay for SNAP benefits, which they won't vote for, that kind of thing. Right. Look, I'm not saying it's a bridge too far or not, but I do think the American people need to know there are consequences to this kind of action. And Mark Kelly is an 06, I think I'm right about that. He's a commander, right? Which is a colonel I'm an Army guy, right? So he should know this stuff. And what he also needs to know, and what all people in uniform service need to know, is that as a component of your service within the provisions of the law, you can be recalled. And as such, look, when you take the oath and you become an officer, you're not just an officer while you're in uniform. You're an officer when you get up in the morning, before you put your clothes on, when you're in the shower, when you're at the grocery store with your family. Doesn't matter if you're wearing the uniform. You are expected to uphold the virtues and the values of the United States military as a representative to the community and to the world. And you can't do that. There's going to be punishment. There's going to be consequences. So I think that Mark Kelly has probably gotten exactly what he's asked for.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. We had a former CIA, a Navy captain, Army Ranger, Air Force Academy graduate, a Naval JAG officer, and Naval Reserve JAG officer. Pretty high-ranking people. Let me switch gears with you.
Can I just say this before you switch gears? Yeah. This is another example of the left destroying every institution and foundation that America relies on. It's just part and parcel to what they do, whether it's the media, whether it's academia, whether it's the police officers in your town. This is what the left does. They destroy everything traditionally that has worked, and they are trying to do this to the military, and we can't let them. But I'll let you move on.
Okay. No, I appreciate your feedback there. Okay. So I read this morning that 2.5 million native-born Americans have gained employment since President Trump took office, and over 1 million foreign-born workers have lost employment. So you have a massive amount of Americans rejoining the labor force, and then a large number of people coming out. Is this due to deportation? Is this employers saying, hey, we want to be America first? Or we're afraid we might get shut down if we get exposed in the media for hiring a bunch of foreigners versus American? What do you think is driving most of that?
It's probably a combination of all that. Episodically, depends on the location in the specific industry or private business. Let me just say this. What do you know? American workers that apparently won't do this work will do this work. And that's what America First is all about. We have for now, since since about 1990, imported this huge amount of labor into our country, not because it's good for the United States of America, oftentimes because it's good for certain business and industrial concerns. And look, I'm a fan of capitalism. I consider myself a complete capitalist, but people will take advantage of the programs that are out there, and they have used these programs to provide themselves with cheap labor so they can increase profits. Good for them to increase profits, but not on the backs of hardworking or Americans that could be hardworking and earning that money to give it to people that don't have any stake in America and have come here. And this is important to note too, generally under temporary conditions and then never leave. It is corrosive to our country. It is disrespectful to Americans. And I think you're seeing the result of the president's policy over time now, where Americans are getting back to work in American businesses. And at the end of the day, isn't that what we all want?
Yes. Yeah. President Trump said his focus going forward is affordability. It seems to be a massive issue. I've done internal polling that's received over 500,000 votes saying affordability is the top thing. How quickly does housing and food become more affordable when you don't have working Americans competing for housing, groceries, apartments against illegal immigrants?
Well, I think, look, it's going to take some time for this to shake out. And I think I think the president wants everybody to know that he's working on this, that we're working on this, and this is the expected results, but it doesn't happen immediately. You got to understand that our government has been incentivizing businesses to provide housing for people that are here illegally, and some that are providing housing for people that are here legally. Same thing with food, same thing with transportation, same thing with education. All these things cost money. And when the government's providing it, especially at a premium rate, that increases the cost for everybody else, and they can't compete at that premium rate. Once the government quits providing at premium rates, then it becomes affordable for American citizens, which is what this whole thing is supposed to be about in the first place.
Yeah. I floated this idea. As you know, President Trump goes into LA. The Democrats throw a giant fit. The media gets on the bandwagon. He goes into Chicago. The media throws a fit. They all, attack him as the worst human that was ever created on planet Earth. I just wonder if maybe President Trump should focus on the red states that voted for him, making life better for them. So physically go into the red states and then financially pull back in the blue states, and we would probably get more self-deportation. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
The president's time in this regard is obviously very valuable and very limited. But I would also say this. I think we have to go preach this gospel to all Americans, because there's so many Americans, especially with our education and certainly the secondary education, that have left our country wanting in what our government's about, what it's supposed to do, and what the limits of government are, and what it's not supposed to do. And if we just stick to the people that already know it and agree with it, I don't think that we actually solve the country's problems in the long haul. So I think the president has to go probably where he's uninvited in some formal respects, but let people know that he cares about them, that he loves them, he wants them to prosper, and what he's doing about this, so that they can see there's a different narrative than the one that they get from the mainstream media, who tell the world that he belongs in the Third Reich, or that he's a communist and he's a king and all those kind of things. Someone has to have the counter narrative, and there's no one more powerful and more persuasive than the president when he's doing it personally.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Final question. I appreciate you coming on today. You've been pushing for more information about Jeffrey Epstein, his behavior, his business dealings, relationship. We're now getting that information. Congress nearly unanimously signed off on this. The president said, I'll sign it the moment it gets to my desk.
Right.
But now what we're finding is there's not a lot of Trump material in there. Jeffrey Epstein, yes, admits he wanted to blackmail Donald Trump, but he didn't have any photos, no videos, right, no witnesses. But what we are finding is a lot of Democrats that were working with him, some of them working under his direction, others taking money, and even more begging for money. What are your thoughts on this whole saga?
Well, look, first of all, our hearts and our prayers and our thoughts go out to the victims. I'm a father of two young girls, and I thank the Lord every day that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't involved with one of my daughters, because I'd likely be in prison right now. But that having been said, we can't forget them in this whole saga. This has been too long in coming. The Democrats had plenty of time to do something about it. They weren't interested. Did we get it perfect? No, I don't think we did. I mean, I certainly respect the one no vote in Congress, because that individual is worried that certain people that were innocent are going to be dragged into this thing, and that's unacceptable in our judicial system. But I think it's so important for the American people to regain the trust in the judicial system that they must see this stuff, and they must know for themselves that the government wasn't working with a convicted pedophile or a non-convicted pedophile, to get whatever the government might have been getting. And I don't know what would be worth, allowing a pedophile to continue that kind of operation. But if there was something, this is our government. It's not just their government. This is our government. It is our country, and we deserve to know these things. I just hope we can protect all the innocent people in this whole saga. But I would say this: I think President Trump and all of us always knew he wasn't involved. He was the guy that kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago as soon as he found out what that guy was all about. But the Democrats have always been connected to Epstein. And you don't have to ask me. You can go to Epstein's decor in his home, which is why I offered the resolution to subpoena Hillary and Bill Clinton, because we need to know what the former Secretary of State and what the former president knew about Epstein and what their involvement was, especially when you read that unfortunately deceased girl's book about them. We need to know, and we need to have the facts.
Do you think that they will end up coming in? Congressman James Comer said, "Hey, they arrested some of our people. We're willing to do the same."
Well, I think I think if it's good enough for Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon, the Democrats, and I agree with them, are famous for saying this: no one is above the law, and that includes Bill and Hillary Clinton.
Absolutely. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on, for all that you do. We'll have you on again. I hope you and your family have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Well, wonderful Thanksgiving and holidays to you and your family. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.